The snow was falling with a fury that Portland, Oregon had not seen in at least 25 years. Each flake was an ice needle cutting through the air, and the wind howled between the buildings like a wild and furious beast. Emma Sullivan dragged her old suitcase through the snow-covered streets, each step sinking up to her knees in the white frozen mass. Her hands, even inside her soaked gloves, had long since lost any sensation. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her eyes burned with tears that froze before reaching her cheeks. She had been thrown out by her own parents. In the middle of a deadly blizzard, 48 hours. That was the deadline. Linda Sullivan, her mother, had given her that Sunday morning. 48 hours to leave the house where Emma had lived her entire 28 years. The house she had helped pay for by working 2 jobs for years. The house where she had cared for her father when he suffered a devastating heart attack. The house where she had spent countless sleepless nights when her mother was diagnosed with diabetes and needed constant monitoring. None of that mattered. None of it made a difference when Madison, her 24-year-old younger sister, showed up pregnant and helpless. Before we continue this heartbreaking story, I need to ask you something. If you are feeling this injustice as much as Emma is feeling it right now, in the middle of this blizzard, hit the like button right now and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the end of this unbelievable story. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been betrayed by those who were supposed to protect you? How did you overcome it? Come on, comment below. Now, let's see what's going to happen to Emma lost in this deadly cold. Linda had been as cold as the ice now covering the streets. Her brown eyes, which Emma remembered as warm in her childhood, were hard and unyielding. Your sister needs this house more than you do, she said in a monotone, emotionless voice. She's going to have a baby. She needs stability. You've always been strong. You've always managed on your own. Madison doesn't have those skills. We transferred the ownership of the house to her. The papers are signed. You have until Tuesday at 6 p.m. to leave. Emma tried to argue. She tried to make her mother understand the insanity of that decision, especially with the biggest snowstorm in decades approaching. The National Weather Service had issued red alerts across Multnomah County. Minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, 70-mile-per-hour winds, snow accumulation up to 3 feet. Do not leave your home under any circumstances. Risk of death from exposure in less than 30 minutes. But Linda Sullivan was relentless. Robert Sullivan, Emma's father, sat silently in his armchair, avoiding looking at the daughter who had cared for him when he was at death's door. And Madison, lounging on the couch with one hand resting dramatically on her still small belly, smiled with thinly disguised satisfaction. Now, 6 hours after that devastating conversation, Emma was walking through the frozen streets of Portland with nowhere to go. She called every contact in her phone. Sarah, from community college, she had dropped out of work, said her apartment was too small. Josh, from work, still lived with his parents who didn't allow visitors. Aunt Margaret explained that Uncle Frank didn't handle changes in routine well, especially during the storm. The emergency shelters were all at full capacity. More than 200 people on the waiting list. Hotels were charging $300 a night due to the absurd demand. Emma had $147 in her wallet. It was all she owned in the world. The streets were deserted and apocalyptic. Abandoned cars formed white mounds along Belmont Street. Streetlights flickered intermittently before going out completely, plunging entire blocks into premature darkness even though it was only 4:30 in the afternoon. Old trees that normally beautified the sidewalks were now threatening skeletons, their ice-laden branches breaking with cracks that echoed like gunshots. Emma passed the grocery store where she bought supplies every week. The windows were covered with wooden boards. A red sign on the door read, "Closed indefinitely due to extreme weather." The little cafe where she sometimes allowed herself a hot chocolate was dark and empty, chairs stacked against the door. The public library where she spent her Saturdays was locked with chains. Every step was an eternity of suffering. Her feet, even inside her old boots, were completely numb. Her legs burned with the effort of wading through the deep snow. The rolling suitcase she dragged had stopped rolling long ago. Now she simply pulled it, hearing the fabric tear against the ice. The wind pushed her thin 128-pound body backward with every step she took forward. She had to lean at a 45-degree angle just to keep from being knocked down. Her clothes were becoming damp. The sweat of her effort combined with melted snow was creating a layer of moisture that, at the current temperature, was as dangerous as being completely wet. Emma knew, from a first aid course she had taken years ago, that moisture and cold were a lethal combination. Hypothermia would progress in stages. First, mental confusion. Then, loss of coordination. Next, the body would begin shutting down non-essential organs. And finally, death. She was already feeling the first signs. Her thoughts were becoming slow, foggy. She stumbled twice on sheets of ice hidden under the snow, almost falling face first. Her right ankle twisted painfully on the second fall, but she barely felt the pain through the general numbness. When she finally reached Northeast Alberta Street, Emma's heart sank like a stone into icy water. The Alberta Community Center was completely dark. All the lights out, and hanging on the metal door, a red and white banner screamed, "Maximum capacity reached. No more spots. Seek shelter at the Gresham Emergency Center 15 miles east." 15 miles 24 kilometers. It might as well have been 1,000, because it was equally impossible. TriMet bus lines were suspended. Taxis weren't running. Uber and Lyft had paused all operations. Walking 24 kilometers in those conditions would be suicide. Emma wouldn't survive even another kilometer. The tears came before she could stop them, burning her eyes before freezing on her cracked cheeks. She was completely alone, completely lost, completely hopeless. Her family had rejected her. Her friends couldn't help. The city had no resources, and nature was actively trying to kill her. Emma turned slowly, looking around with growing desperation. She needed to find something, anything. Store awnings, too exposed to the deadly wind, mailboxes, ridiculously small, abandoned cars. She had tried to open 3, all locked, and she didn't have the strength to break windows. Then, when she was about to give up, about to simply sit in the snow and accept her fate, her eyes caught something on the other side of the street. Partially hidden by a massive snowdrift, the wind had piled against a vacant lot, was a yellow school bus. Emma blinked several times, thinking she might be hallucinating, one of the first symptoms of severe hypothermia. But no, the bus was really there, solid and real. It was parked, or more likely abandoned for years, in an empty lot between 2 old brick buildings. Half the bus was buried under the snow. The wind had pushed against its side, creating a white dune that rose to the windows. The visible windows were fogged and coated with thick ice. The characteristic yellow paint was faded, peeling off in large patches, revealing rusted metal. The sign on the front, barely visible under the snow, read Portland Public Schools, Bus 47. Emma didn't hesitate. She didn't have the luxury of being cautious. That bus represented the difference between possibly surviving the night or definitely dying. She struggled across the street, nearly falling on a patch of black ice. When she reached the bus, the snow was piled against the folding door, creating a solid wall nearly 3 feet high. She dropped her suitcase and backpack and began digging with her hands. Her fingers screamed in pain as she pushed and scraped the packed snow. It took 15 minutes of desperate work. 15 minutes during which Emma thought many times she wouldn't make it. Her hands were so numb, she could no longer feel individual fingers. But finally, she managed to create enough space. Emma grabbed the chrome lever of the door and pulled with all the strength left in her exhausted body. The door resisted, and panic rose in her throat. What if it was locked? But then, with a loud screech of rusted metal, the door gave and opened a few inches. Emma forced her fingers into the opening and pulled again, using her body weight. The door opened wider, creating a narrow gap. Emma shoved her suitcase and backpack through the gap first, hearing them hit the interior steps. Then she squeezed her own body through, having to turn sideways. Her jacket caught on the metal, but she yanked hard, hearing the fabric tear. It didn't matter. With one final effort, Emma threw herself inside and practically fell up the 3 steps, landing on her knees in the aisle. The door slammed shut behind her with a bang, cutting off the constant howling of the wind. And suddenly, everything was relatively quiet. Emma stayed there for a long moment, on her knees, just breathing. Great clouds of vapor came from her mouth. It was still very cold inside, probably around 5 degrees below zero, but compared to the -20 outside, it felt almost warm. And being shielded from the wind made a huge difference. Slowly, Emma stood up, her legs trembling. She let her eyes adjust to the darkness. The only light came from the dirty windows, a pale gray glow. The bus had about 15 rows of green vinyl seats, the upholstery torn in many places. The floor was dirty, covered with dry leaves, old papers, crushed cans. But at the back of the bus, Emma saw something that made her heart tighten. Old blankets, pieces of cardboard stacked up, plastic bags. Someone had used this bus as shelter before. Emma began walking slowly down the aisle, holding onto the seat backs. She needed to find the best place to settle, maybe in the back where there was less draft. But when she reached the middle of the aisle, she heard something that made her freeze completely. A moan, low, almost inaudible, but definitely human. Emma's heart raced. She wasn't alone. The moan came again, weaker this time, from the back of the bus. With her heart pounding violently in her chest, Emma walked slowly toward the last rows. And then she saw him. Curled up on the back seat, almost unrecognizable under layers of dirty rags, and a torn military coat, was a man. He was lying on his side in the fetal position, shaking violently. His hair was a matted mess of dark brown and gray. His long, dirty beard covered most of his face. His hands were bluish, fingers swollen and cracked. His skin had a frightening grayish tone. Emma approached carefully. "Sir?" Her voice came out trembling. "Sir, are you okay?" Stupid question, she thought immediately. He obviously wasn't okay. The man opened his eyes with difficulty. They were light blue, but unfocused, glazed, looking without really seeing. He tried to say something, but his cracked lips only produced an unintelligible murmur. His breathing was shallow and irregular. Emma recognized the signs immediately. Severe hypothermia, stage 3, maybe even stage 4. If she didn't do something, that man would die within hours, maybe minutes. She looked at her battered backpack on the aisle floor. Inside, it was all that remained of her life. 2 changes of clothes, an old wool blanket, a thin towel, A half-full bottle of water? 3 granola bars. That was all she had. Everything. Emma had been thrown out, rejected, left to die by her own family. She had nothing. She owed no one anything. That man was a complete stranger. He could be dangerous. She had her own problems, her own survival to worry about. But when she looked at that trembling, alone dying human being in the back of an abandoned bus, she couldn't just turn her back. "All right," Emma said, more to herself than to him. "I'm going to help you." Emma worked quickly, though her own hands were almost without feeling. First, she opened her backpack and took out the gray wool blanket. It was old, frayed at the edges, with a musty smell, but it was thick and could retain body heat. It was the only blanket she owned, the only one. If she gave it to that man, she herself would spend the night without any protection from the deadly cold. But she didn't hesitate. Emma approached the man carefully. "I'm going to cover you, okay? Please don't be scared." He didn't respond, only kept trembling uncontrollably, his body shaking in violent spasms. Emma unfolded the blanket and placed it carefully over the man's curled body, tucking the edges under him to hold in the heat better. Then she took her extra jacket, the sweatshirt she carried in her backpack as a spare layer, and used it as an improvised pillow under his head. Now she had one less layer of protection for herself. Next, she took the bottle of water. It was cold but not frozen. She unscrewed the cap and crouched beside the man. "Sir, I need you to drink a little, just a sip. It will help." She gently supported his head, lifting it a few inches, and tilted the bottle against his cracked, bloody lips. At first, the water just dribbled from the corner of his mouth, dripping onto his dirty coat. But then Emma saw his throat move slightly. He was swallowing. "That's it," she encouraged softly. "That's right." Another sip. He drank a little more before coughing weakly and turning his head. Emma put the bottle away, now with much less water than before. Then she took one of the granola bars. There were 3. They were all she had to eat until she could figure out her next step. She opened the wrapper with trembling fingers and broke off a small piece. "You need to eat something. It will give you energy." She placed the piece between his lips. He chewed slowly, mechanically, as if his body were operating on autopilot, without conscious thought. Emma gave him 2 more small pieces before putting away the rest. Now she had 2.5 bars left. During the next hour, Emma did everything she could. She rubbed his hands between her own, trying to restore circulation, ignoring the sharp pain in her own frozen fingers. She adjusted the blanket several times, making sure no heat escaped. She removed his boots, old soaked military boots, and massaged his bluish feet through dirty torn socks, trying to bring back some blood flow. The man kept trembling, but Emma noticed the tremors were becoming a little less violent. That was good. Tremors meant the body was still fighting, still trying to generate heat. When the tremors stopped completely, it would be a very bad sign. Emma sat on the seat next to him, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to conserve her own body heat. She used her thin towel as a kind of shawl around her shoulders. It wasn't enough. She felt the cold penetrating her bones, her own hands and feet beginning to lose sensation again. Outside, the blizzard continued its relentless fury. The wind shook the bus periodically, making the whole structure creak and groan. Snow piled up against the windows, blocking more and more of the already weak light. The temperature inside the bus was dropping as night approached. Emma looked at the man beside her. Even under the dirt and wild beard, she could see he was older than she was. Maybe 40 or 45 years old. There were scars on his hands, marks of a hard life. Who was he? How had he ended up there? Was he a chronic homeless man? An addict? Someone who had lost everything and ended up on the streets? It didn't matter, Emma thought. At that moment, he was just a human being who needed help. Just like her. The hours dragged on. Emma took brief, restless naps, waking every 15 or 20 minutes to check the man, to adjust the blanket, to make sure he was still breathing. At one point, around 9 p.m., according to her cell phone that was almost out of battery, she gave him more water and more granola. She herself ate a few pieces of the second bar, chewing slowly, making each bite last. The temperature kept dropping. Emma could see her own breath forming thick clouds of vapor. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her hands had lost almost all their color. She was starting to feel that dangerous drowsiness, that urge to just close her eyes and sleep forever. No, she forced herself to think. Don't sleep. Sleeping is dying. Stay awake. Keep moving. She stood up with difficulty and began walking up and down the bus aisle, swinging her arms, stomping her feet, trying to keep her circulation going. Every movement was agony. Every step required willpower she didn't know she had. When she returned to the back seat, she checked the man again. His tremors had diminished considerably. His breathing seemed a little more regular, a little deeper. Maybe, just maybe, he would survive the night. Emma curled up on the seat beside him, using her backpack as a pillow, wrapping herself as best she could in her thin towel and torn jacket. She looked out the dirty window, seeing only white, only endless snow under a black starless sky. She thought of her parents, of Linda and Robert Sullivan, sleeping comfortably in their warm beds, in their heated house. not caring one bit whether the daughter they had rejected was alive or dead. She thought of Madison, probably watching television on the couch, maybe eating ice cream, dreaming of the baby to come, completely oblivious to the suffering she had caused. Emma felt anger burn in her chest, an anger that temporarily pushed away a bit of the cold. How could they do this? How could parents abandon their own daughter to die? But then the anger was replaced by a deep, heavy sadness. She had never been loved by them, she realized. Maybe she never had been. She had been useful, yes. Convenient, but loved? No, never. The tears came again, silent and warm against her frozen cheeks. Emma cried for the home she lost, for the family she had never really had, for the life she could have lived if she had been valued. She cried until she had no more tears, until exhaustion finally won. Her last thoughts before slipping into a restless sleep were about the man beside her. She had given him her blanket, her food, her water. She had cared for him when no one else would, just as she wished someone would care for her. And then, finally, Emma slept while the worst blizzard in decades continued its deadly dance outside, burying the bus deeper and deeper in a white grave of ice and silence. Emma woke with a violent jolt, her whole body shaking uncontrollably. For a moment of absolute panic, she didn't know where she was. Everything was dark. Everything was cold. Her whole body ached with an intensity she had never experienced. Her hands and feet were completely numb, as if they no longer existed. Her head throbbed with a dull, constant pain. Then, everything came rushing back in a devastating flood of memories. The bus, the blizzard, the eviction, the dying man. Emma forced her eyes wide open. The faint morning light filtered through the bus windows, but it was a strange, diffused light, as if passing through something very thick. It took her a few seconds to realize what it was. Snow. The windows were completely covered with snow from the outside. The bus had been partially buried overnight. She forced herself to sit up, every muscle protesting. Her jacket was stiff with ice where the moisture from her breath had frozen during the night. Her fingers were useless claws that barely responded to her brain's commands. When she tried to stand, her legs gave way and she collapsed back onto the seat, clinging to the backrest in front of her. Then she remembered the man. With monumental effort, Emma crawled to the back seat where she had left him the night before. Her heart pounded with fear of what she might find. What if he had died during the night? What if her efforts hadn't been enough? What if she had given away her blanket, her food, her water, only to wake beside a frozen corpse? But when she reached the back seat, she saw his chest rise and fall. Breathing, he was still alive. The man was still curled beneath Emma's gray wool blanket, now covered in a thin layer of crystalline frost. His shivering had stopped completely, which could be either good or very, very bad. Emma knew enough about hypothermia to understand that when the body stopped shivering, it meant either recovery or total surrender. With trembling, clumsy fingers, Emma touched the man's neck, searching for a pulse. It took several agonizing seconds to find it, but it was there, weak but steady, better than the night before. Emma sighed in relief, her breath forming a thick white cloud in the icy air. She checked his face, gently brushing aside a few tangled strands of hair. His skin was still pale, but no longer carried the frightening grayish hue of the night before. His lips, though still cracked, now had a faint touch of color. He was improving. Slowly, but improving. Emma sat down on the seat beside him, pulling her knees to her chest again, trying to conserve what little heat her body could still generate. She pulled her phone from her jacket pocket. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. 4% battery, and when she unlocked it, she saw the time, 6:37 a.m. on Monday. Monday, she should have been at work in 2 hours. She should have been waking in her warm bed, taking a hot shower, brewing coffee, getting dressed for another normal day at the accounting office. Instead, she was trapped in an abandoned school bus, half buried in snow, having spent the night caring for a stranger while fighting off hypothermia. Emma checked the news before the battery died completely. The headlines were alarming. Asterisk Portland, paralyzed by worst blizzard in 30 years. Asterisk at least 12 dead across Oregon due to extreme weather. Asterisk governor declares state of emergency. Asterisk temperatures reach record low of minus 23 degrees Fahrenheit. Asterisk more than 200,000 homes without power. Asterisk roads impassable. Medical emergencies airlifted by helicopters. Asterisk the National Weather Service had updated the alert. The blizzard would continue for at least another 24 hours. Another 12 to 18 inches of snow expected. Winds sustained at 50 to 60 miles per hour. Temperatures not rising above 0 Fahrenheit for the next 3 days. 3 days. Emma closed her eyes, feeling despair threaten to suffocate her. How would she survive 3 days in that frozen bus? She was already at her limit. Her food was almost gone. She had no water except what remained in the bottle. She had no way to stay properly warm. And now she was responsible not only for herself, but also for a sick man who could barely move. The phone beeped a low battery warning. Then the screen went black. Dead. Emma slipped it back into her pocket, knowing it was useless now, but unwilling to discard it. She looked around the bus more carefully than she had the night before. The faint morning light revealed more details inside. The seats were all torn, yellowed foam padding exposed. The floor was littered with daybread leaves, old papers, fast food wrappers, crushed beer cans, graffiti scrawled across some walls, crude words and drawings. At the back of the bus, near where the man lay, Emma saw clear evidence that others had once used this place for shelter. Piles of old blankets, ripped sleeping bags, cardboard boxes likely used as insulation from the freezing metal floor. Emma dragged herself to that pile, holding onto seat backs to keep from falling. When she got there, she began examining the items. Most were in terrible condition, dirty, moldy, but some could still be useful. A blue sleeping bag with a broken zipper, but otherwise intact. 2 thin but functional military wool blankets. Several large cardboard boxes that could serve as insulation. Emma worked methodically, even with her nearly useless fingers. She arranged the cardboard around the back seat where the man lay, creating an extra barrier against the cold seeping from the bus floor. Then she layered the sleeping bag and 1 military blanket over him, adding to the warmth of the wool blanket she had already given him. The more layers, the better the heat retention. As she worked, Emma listened to the relentless wind outside. Occasionally, the entire bus shuddered when a particularly strong gust struck. Snow scraped against the metal windows and roof, a sinister, constant sound like claws scratching. When she finished adding layers over the man, Emma took the second military blanket for herself. It wasn't much, but better than her single thin towel. She wrapped herself tightly and sat on the seat across from him, watching him carefully. Around 8 a.m. he began to stir. Small movements at first, just his fingers twitching. Then his head shifted slightly side to side. His eyes moved rapidly under closed lids, as if he were dreaming. Emma leaned forward, alert. "Sir," she called softly. "Can you hear me?" A low groan, then another, and then, very slowly, his eyelids opened. His eyes were light blue. She saw now in the better morning light. Beautiful blue eyes that looked completely lost and confused. They moved around the bus interior without focus, trying to process where he was. When they finally settled on Emma, there was fear in them. "It's okay," Emma said quickly, keeping her voice calm and non-threatening. "It's okay. You're safe. You were freezing to death when I found you last night. In this bus. I helped you. You're safe now." His eyes studied her for a long moment, and Emma could see the effort he was making to process her words, to gather thoughts through the fog of hypothermia and exhaustion. His lips moved, trying to form words, but only hoarse, unintelligible sounds came out. "Don't try to talk yet," Emma said. "You need water first. Let me help you." She took the water bottle, now with only a few sips left, and carefully lifted his head. He drank greedily, water spilling down the sides of his mouth, soaking his scruffy beard. When the bottle was empty, Emma set it aside. There was no more water. That was a problem she'd need to solve soon. The man closed his eyes again, the small effort already draining him. But a few minutes later, he opened them once more, and this time managed to form words, though his voice was harsh and broken. Where am I?" he murmured. "In an abandoned school bus," Emma replied. "On Northeast Alberta Street, in Portland. There's a blizzard outside. A very, very bad one." He frowned, clearly confused. How did I get here?" "I don't know," Emma admitted. "You were already here when I came in last night looking for shelter. You were nearly unconscious, freezing to death. I don't know how you got into the bus or where you came from." The man closed his eyes, clearly trying to remember. Emma saw his face twist with concentration, then with frustration. I don't remember," he finally said, his voice breaking. "I don't remember anything. How did I get here? Why was I out in the cold?" Emma felt a pang of concern. Memory loss after severe hypothermia wasn't unusual, but it was worrying. "It's okay," she said gently. "Sometimes when the body goes through extreme stress, memory gets fuzzy for a while. It may come back. Do you remember your name?" He opened his eyes again, and Emma saw panic in them. "My name," he repeated slowly. "My name is—" He paused a long time, his face showing intense concentration. "Daniel," he finally said, relief in his voice. "My name is Daniel. Daniel Cross." "Okay, Daniel," Emma said, relieved that at least he remembered that. "My name is Emma Sullivan. Nice to meet you considering the circumstances." Daniel tried to smile, but it came out as more of a grimace. "Thank you," he said, genuine emotion in his hoarse voice. "Thank you for helping me. You saved my life, didn't you?" Emma shrugged uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Daniel said firmly, despite the weakness in his voice. "That's not what anyone would do. Most people would have ignored me, left me to die." His eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, especially considering that you obscurely have your own struggles. Emma looked away, unwilling to talk about her situation. "You need more rest," she said, changing the subject. "You're still very weak. I'm going to see if I can find anything else useful on this bus." She stood and began searching the rest of the vehicle more systematically. At the front, near the driver's seat, she found an old first aid kit beneath the dashboard. Most items were expired or useless, but there were some bandages. A silver emergency blanket still sealed in its package, and miraculously, 3 packs of saltine crackers that seemed long forgotten but still intact. Emma carried her findings back to the rear. The thermal blanket was a treasure. She unfolded it immediately and draped it over Daniel, adding yet another layer of heat retention. His eyes were closed again, but she could see he wasn't asleep. His eyelids flickered with small movements. Emma sat down and opened one of the cracker packs. They were hard as stone and tasted like cardboard, but they were food. She ate half slowly, chewing thoroughly, making them last. The other half she saved. Look, I need you to pause here for a second and really think about what's happening. Emma is rationing food with a stranger, even knowing she herself might starve. Does this move you? Does it make you think about kindness and sacrifice? Leave your comment below telling me what you would do in this situation. And if you want to see how this story ends, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Now let's continue. By around noon, Daniel was awake again, clearly a bit more alert. He managed to sit partially upright, leaning against the bus wall, still wrapped in all the layers of blankets. Emma gave him half a pack of crackers and he ate slowly, with effort but determination. You said there's a blizzard outside, Daniel said after eating. How bad is it? Really bad, Emma answered. The worst in 30 years. According to the news, at least 12 people already dead. The whole city is paralyzed. No power in hundreds of thousands of homes. All roads closed. Temperatures in the -20s. And it's supposed to stay this way for another 2 or 3 days. Daniel closed his eyes, absorbing the information. And you, how did you end up here, in this bus? Emma hesitated. She didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to relive the humiliation and pain of her family's rejection. But something in Daniel's gentle, concerned eyes made her want to tell him. My parents kicked me out, she said simply, keeping her voice even. 48 hours notice. Transferred the house to my younger sister because she's pregnant and needs it more. Didn't matter that I helped pay for it for years. That I took care of them when they were sick. None of that mattered. Daniel watched her silently for a long moment. And you had nowhere to go? No, Emma said, feeling tears threaten but refusing to let them fall. All the shelters were full. I had no money for a hotel. Friends couldn't help. So I was basically wandering the streets until I found this bus. In the middle of a deadly blizzard, Daniel said, anger in his voice. Your parents threw you out in the middle of a deadly blizzard. Emma just nodded, not trusting her voice. And even then, Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger with emotion. Even after being treated that way, even with nothing, you found me here and decided to help. You chose to share your food, your water, your blanket. You could have left me to die and kept everything for yourself, but you didn't. I couldn't let you die, Emma said simply. I just couldn't. You're a human being. You needed help. Daniel looked at her with an expression Emma couldn't quite decipher. Gratitude, yes, but something deeper too. Respect, maybe. Admiration. You have a rare heart, Emma Sullivan, he said softly. In a world where your own family abandoned you, you chose to save a stranger. That says a lot about who you are. Emma felt her face grow warm, uncomfortable with the compliment. Anyone would have done the same, she murmured. No, Daniel said with conviction. No, they wouldn't, believe me. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the howling wind outside and the occasional groan of the bus. Emma noticed Daniel kept trying to remember something, his brow furrowed in concentration, his fingers tapping nervously against the blanket. You're trying to remember how you got here? Emma asked gently. Yes, Daniel said, frustrated. I can remember fragments. I was driving. It was dark, snowing heavily. There was someone else in the car with me. No, wait. I was on the phone, talking to someone through the car system. Bluetooth. I was arguing about work, I think. And then, he paused, his face twisting as if in pain. And then there were lights, very bright lights coming toward me. I turned the wheel, the car skidded, I lost control. And then, nothing. Everything goes black after that. The next thing I remember is waking up here, seeing you. Emma processed the information. You think you had a car accident? Must have been, Daniel said. But I have no idea where. No idea how I went from the accident to this bus. No idea how much time passed. He looked at his own hands, at his torn, dirty clothes. And no idea why I look like this, like a homeless man. Emma studied Daniel more carefully now. Beneath all the dirt and the scruffy beard, she began to notice things. His hands, though battered and filthy, had nails that had once been well kept. His hair, though tangled, had clearly been given a proper cut not too long ago. And when she looked closely at his torn military coat, she saw beneath it a shirt that, though dirty and stained with dried blood, looked high quality. Egyptian cotton, maybe. And on his wrist, partly hidden by the sleeve, she saw what looked like an expensive watch. Daniel, Emma said slowly, I don't think you're homeless. Your clothes under, all the dirt their quality, and that watch on your wrist. That's very expensive. Daniel looked at his wrist, surprised, as if seeing the watch for the first time. He carefully removed it and examined it. Rolex Submariner, he murmured. I remember this watch. It was a gift, from someone important, but I can't remember who. He kept staring at the watch, turning it in his hands, and then Emma saw his eyes widen. There's an engraving, he said urgently. On the back, Asteristo Daniel, who built empires with his own hands. With love, Catherine. Catherine. Emma repeated, "Who is Catherine?" "I don't know," Daniel said, frustration heavy in his voice. "Wife? Mother? Sister? I don't know. But she must be someone close if she gave me a gift like this." Emma thought for a moment. "You said the name Daniel Cross felt familiar when you remembered it. Do you think you can recall anything else about yourself? Where you live? What you do?" Daniel closed his eyes, focusing hard. Emma could see the strain in his face, the effort he was making. Several minutes passed in silence. Then suddenly, his eyes opened. "Real estate," he said, his voice full of sudden certainty. "I work in real estate, development, construction. I own properties, many properties, residential condominiums, apartment complexes, commercial buildings." "You're a real estate developer?" Emma asked, surprised. "Yes," Daniel said, and more memories now seemed to flow back faster. "Cross Development Corporation, that's my company. I founded it 15 years ago. No, 17. I started with one small house, I renovated and sold, then another, and then I moved on to bigger buildings. Now I have a portfolio of more than 50 properties in Portland and surrounding areas." Emma just stared at him, processing this shocking information. The man she had found apparently homeless, whom she had fed with her last scraps of food, whom she had covered with her only blanket, was actually a wealthy businessman. "I was coming back from a meeting," Daniel continued, the memories clearly returning more quickly now. "In Vancouver, Washington. It was snowing, but I needed to get back to Portland. I had another important meeting the next morning, about a new project, a luxury condominium near the Pearl District. 48 units, a $30 million investment." He paused, his breathing quickened by the effort of remembering. "I was driving on Interstate 5, heading back to Portland. The blizzard was getting worse. I should have stopped, I should have waited, but I'm stubborn, always have been. And then this truck came skidding across the middle lane. It was completely out of control. It was coming straight at me. I jerked the wheel sharply to the right to avoid the collision. My car went off the road, rolled, I don't know how many times. And then, everything went black." Emma listened, fascinated and horrified at the same time. "And you got out of the car after the crash?" "Must have," Daniel said. I think I was confused, possibly concussed, hypothermic, disoriented. I probably got out of the car and started walking, thinking I was heading somewhere safe. But I was really just getting more and more lost in the blizzard. And eventually I ended up here, in this bus, not knowing how." Emma shook her head slowly, trying to process it all. "Your car must still be out there somewhere, off the road, buried in the snow. People must be looking for you. Your family, your employees, the police." "Probably," Daniel agreed. "But with this blizzard, with all the roads closed, with hundreds of emergencies happening simultaneously, double quotes," he paused, the reality of the situation sinking in. "It could take days for them to find me. If they find me." A heavy silence fell between them. Emma looked out the window, seeing only white snow pressed against the glass. They were trapped, completely isolated. She had less than one granola bar left, 2 packs of old crackers, and no water. Daniel was still too weak to walk very far, even if the conditions outside allowed it, and the blizzard showed no sign of letting up anytime soon. "We're going to survive this," Daniel said suddenly, his voice firm despite the desperate situation. "We're both going to survive. You didn't save me just for us to die here together. Understood?" Emma looked at him, and for the first time since she had been kicked out of her home, she felt a spark of hope. She was no longer completely alone. She had someone by her side now, someone who was fighting for survival just as much as she was. "Understood," she said softly. The rest of that Monday passed slowly. Emma and Daniel carefully rationed what little they had, sharing half a granola bar and a pack of crackers between them. The lack of water was worrying. They were thirsty, truly thirsty. The kind that makes your throat ache and your lips crack even more. It was Daniel who had the idea. "Snow," he said, around 3 in the afternoon. "We can melt snow. It's not ideal, it's not purified drinking water, but it's better than dying of dehydration." Emma looked at the windows completely covered in snow. "How are we going to get snow without leaving the bus? If we open the doors, we'll lose all the heat we've managed to build up in here." Daniel thought for a moment. "The emergency windows," he said. "In the back, most school buses have emergency windows that can be opened by pushing them outward. We can open one just enough to scoop some snow and then close it quickly." They worked together, though Daniel was still weak and had to lean heavily on Emma. At the back of the bus, they found 2 emergency windows marked with red instructions. Emma read the instructions, then slid the safety latch and pushed the window outward. Immediately, a blast of icy wind and snow rushed in, making them both recoil. But Emma forced herself forward, reaching out and grabbing big handfuls of snow packed against the opening. She placed them into an empty soda can they had found on the bus floor, filling it completely. Then she did the same with another can. When she had 2 cans full of snow, she quickly closed the window, locking it again. Both of them were shivering violently from the brief contact with the outside cold, but they had snow. Emma placed the cans between their bodies, using their body heat to slowly melt the snow. It took nearly 2 hours, but eventually they had water. Not much, maybe the equivalent of a full glass, but it was something. They drank in turns, small sips, making it last. The water was icy cold and tasted slightly metallic from the can, but it was the most wonderful thing Emma had tasted in a long time. As the afternoon turned into night, the temperature inside the bus dropped even further. Emma and Daniel sat close together on the back seats, sharing all the layers of blankets, quilts, and the sleeping bag, using each other's body heat to survive. It wasn't romantic or inappropriate, it was simply survival. Two human beings doing what was necessary to make it through one more night in the frozen hell. Emma, Daniel said in the darkness, his voice low but clear. When we get out of here, when this blizzard passes, I'm going to make sure you never go without a place to call home again. That's a promise. Emma didn't respond immediately. Part of her wanted to believe him, but another part, the part that had been rejected and betrayed by her own family, was afraid to trust. People make promises when they need you, she thought. But do they keep those promises afterward? You don't owe me anything, Emma finally said. I helped you because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected anything in return. I know, Daniel said. And that's exactly why I'm making this promise. Because you have a heart that this world tries to break but can't, and I'm not going to let that heart be wasted. Emma felt tears sting her eyes, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Thank you, she whispered in the darkness, her voice breaking. No, Daniel replied, his hand finding hers beneath the layers of blankets and squeezing gently. Thank you. For reminding me there is still kindness in this world. For saving me when I was dying. For being exactly who you are. They slept that night, wrapped together, under every layer they could find. Two strangers whom fate had brought together in the middle of a deadly storm. Outside, the wind kept howling relentlessly, and the snow kept falling, burying the bus deeper and deeper. But inside that small frozen space, there was something the cold could not destroy. The stubborn spark of hope in humanity that refuses to go out, no matter how dark the night becomes. Emma woke up Tuesday morning with her whole body aching and a thirst that made her throat burn as if she were swallowing glass. She was wrapped under layers of quilts and blankets, with the warm weight of another human body pressed against her back. For a moment of confusion, she didn't understand where she was, or who was with her. Then it all came back. The bus, the blizzard, Daniel. She carefully opened her eyes. The light filtering through the snow-covered windows was brighter today, suggesting the sky might be a little clearer. Or maybe it was just wishful thinking, the hope that the storm was finally easing. Emma moved carefully, trying not to wake Daniel, but he was already awake. She felt him shift behind her. Good morning, he said, his voice still hoarse but definitely stronger than the day before. If we can even call it good. Are you feeling better? Emma asked, turning to face him. Daniel nodded slowly. Still weak? Still sore? But yes. Better. Thanks to you. He sat up with some effort, pushing aside the layers of blankets. We need water. And food. What's left? Emma made a mental inventory. Half a granola bar, 1 pack of old crackers, and we can melt more snow for water. Not enough, Daniel said, frowning. Not for more than a day or two. We need to find more resources, or we need to get out of here. Get out to where? Emma asked, glancing at the snow-covered windows. The blizzard is still going. The streets must be completely impassable, and you're still too weak to walk long distances in conditions like this. Daniel knew she was right, but Emma could see the frustration on his face. He was clearly the kind of man used to taking action, solving problems, being in control. This situation of helplessness must have been torturous for him. Let's give it one more day, Emma said, making the decision for both of them. We'll stay here today, conserve energy, wait to see if the storm eases. If conditions improve by tomorrow morning, Wednesday, we can try to find help. But today, with you still recovering and the blizzard possibly at its peak, it would be suicide to try to leave. Daniel watched her for a long moment, and Emma saw him make the decision to trust her judgment. All right, he agreed. One more day, but if nothing changes by tomorrow, we'll have to risk it. They spent the first hour of the morning repeating the process of scooping snow through the emergency window and melting it with body heat. This time, they managed to fill 3 cans, which would give them a little more water for the day. Then they divided the remaining half of the granola bar for breakfast, each eating their tiny portion very slowly, chewing thoroughly to trick their starving stomachs. As they ate, Daniel began talking more about his life, his memories clearly returning with more strength now that he was recovering. Cross Development Corporation started in a garage, he said, a nostalgic smile playing on his cracked lips. Literally, I was 23, had just graduated in business from Portland State University with a mountain of student debt. I had no money, no connections, nothing except ambition and the willingness to work 18 hours a day. How did you start? Emma asked, genuinely curious. I bought a foreclosure house, Daniel explained. A terrible house in a terrible neighborhood. It was falling apart, had water damage, mold, dangerous old wiring, everything bad you can imagine. I used every cent I had saved working 2 jobs during college as the minimum down payment. I got a renovation loan that no sane bank should have given me. And then I spent 6 months renovating that house myself. I learned carpentry from YouTube, plumbing from a retired neighbor, electrical work from reading manuals. I worked from 5 in the morning until midnight every single day, and it worked. Emma asked. I bought it for $45,000, spent $20,000 on renovations, sold it for $98,000, profit of $33,000 in 6 months of brutal work. Daniel shook his head, remembering, it felt like a fortune at the time. I had never seen that much money in my life, and I realized I had found my path. And then you did it again, Emma said, and again, and again. Each house a little bigger, a little better, in slightly better neighborhoods. Then I started buying small apartment buildings, then bigger buildings. Then I started building from the ground up instead of just renovating. And before I knew it, 17 years had passed and I was managing an empire of 50 properties, collectively worth more than $200 million. Emma watched him as he spoke, seeing not just the successful businessman but the ambitious young man he had once been, working alone in a crumbling house, betting everything on a dream. Do you have family? Emma asked after a moment of silence. Wife? Kids? You mentioned to Catherine yesterday. Daniel's expression grew darker. I had a wife, Catherine. We got married when I was 26. She was, ... She was amazing. Smart, funny, supportive. She believed in me when no one else did. Worked alongside me in the early years, helping with accounting, marketing, everything that needed to be done. Had Emma asked softly, catching the past tense. She died 4 years ago, Daniel said, his voice growing hoarse. Ovarian cancer, diagnosis to death in 9 months. We never had kids. She always wanted to, but we were always so busy building the business. Always saying next year, when things calm down, but things never calmed down. And then suddenly it was too late. I'm so sorry, Emma said, and she truly meant it. She could see the genuine pain in his eyes. I threw myself into work after she died. Daniel continued. Worked 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, because when I stopped, when I was quiet, all I could feel was the emptiness. Her absence. So I just, ... didn't stop. I turned myself into a machine. Expanded the business bigger and bigger, making more and more money, collecting more and more properties. As if that could somehow fill the hole, she left. He paused, looking at his hands. My friends drifted away because I never had time for them. My family grew frustrated because I canceled every holiday dinner because I had business meetings. Employees began to fear me because I became this impossible boss who demanded perfection and was never satisfied. I became someone Catherine wouldn't have recognized. Someone she wouldn't have liked. Emma said nothing, just listened. Sometimes, she was learning. The best thing you can do for someone is simply be present, simply listen. And then last night, or 2 nights ago, whenever it was, Daniel continued, I was driving back from a meeting that probably wasn't as important as I thought it was, driving in dangerous conditions because I'm too stubborn to admit I should wait, and I almost died. Would have died, if not for you. He looked directly at Emma now, his blue eyes intense and serious. Do you know what I thought when I woke up yesterday and realized someone had saved me? That had shared with me her food, her blanket, her care? I thought about how long it had been since someone had done something kind for me without expecting anything in return, without wanting a business favor, or a donation, or a connection, just ... pure kindness. And I couldn't remember the last time, maybe never, except with Catherine. Emma felt her face flush. Daniel, you just saved my life. Daniel interrupted her. And in the process, you reminded me of who I used to be, of who I want to be again. Someone who sees human beings as human beings, not as business transactions or stepping stones to more success. Someone who helps because it's the right thing to do. Emma didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded, feeling tears sting her eyes again. They spent the rest of the morning in relative quiet, conserving energy, sipping melted water, keeping warm under the layers of blankets. Around noon, they divided the last pack of old crackers, each eating half of the 6 crackers, chewing slowly. That's it, Emma said after they finished. Last food? All we have left is a quarter of a granola bar. Daniel looked out the window, trying to see through the snow pressed against the glass. The storm looks like it's easing, he said. The wind isn't as strong as yesterday, and I think I can see a little more light coming in. Maybe the sky is clearing. Should we try the emergency window? Emma suggested. See if we can see anything. Together, they crawled to the back of the bus and carefully opened the emergency window a few inches. The wind that rushed in was cold, but not as sharp and fierce as in previous days. And when Emma looked out, pressing her face against the narrow opening, she saw that Daniel was right. The sky was still gray, but it was a lighter gray, and the snow falling was lighter, sparser. It's passing, Emma said, feeling a spark of hope. The storm is finally passing. Then tomorrow morning, Daniel said with determination, we're getting out of here. We'll find help. We'll survive this. Emma closed the window and they returned to their seats, wrapping themselves in the layers of blankets again. The afternoon passed slowly, both of them dozing intermittently, their bodies conserving energy for the challenge the morning would bring. It was around 5 in the afternoon, as the light outside was beginning to fade again. Then Emma heard something that made her heart race. A sound coming from outside. A mechanical sound. Loud, growing louder. "Daniel," she said, shaking him awake. "Daniel, do you hear that?" Daniel sat up quickly, alert. Both of them went completely still, listening. And then they heard it clearly. The unmistakable roar of an engine. Not a car, something bigger. A truck, maybe, or a plow. "Someone's clearing the streets," Daniel said, his voice full of excitement. "Snowplows. The snowplows are out now that the storm is easing." They moved as quickly as their weak bodies allowed, dragging themselves to the front of the bus. Emma tried to wipe the frost from the inside of the windshield with her hands, creating a small, clear circle. Through it, she could see flashing orange lights. A huge snowplow was crawling slowly down Northeast Alberta Street, its massive blade pushing enormous heaps of snow to the sides. "We need to get their attention," Emma shouted. She began pounding on the window with her fists, shouting even though she knew they probably couldn't hear her through the thick glass and over the roar of the engine. Daniel joined her, both of them pounding and shouting desperately. But the truck kept going, its operators focused on their task of clearing the main road, not noticing the half-buried abandoned school bus in the vacant lot beside it. Emma felt despair threaten to engulf her as she watched the flashing orange lights fade away, the sound of the engine growing fainter. "They didn't see us," she said, her voice breaking. "They didn't see us. But they'll be back," Daniel said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "This is just the first pass. They'll make several passes on this street, clearing layer by layer, and when they come back, we'll be ready. Let's find a way to signal them." They spent the next hour preparing. Daniel had the idea of using the broken glass from one of the bottles they found on the bus floor. "Glass reflects light," he explained. "If we can position this near the window, when the truck's headlights pass by, it might create a reflection they'll notice." Emma had an even better idea. "Your watch," she said. "The Rolex. Polished metal. It'll reflect even better than glass." Daniel didn't hesitate. He took off the expensive watch, the gift from his late wife, and handed it to Emma. "Use it," he said simply. "Use whatever it takes. We need to get out of here." They waited, hearts pounding, ears straining for any sound of engines returning. 40 minutes passed, then an hour. Emma was beginning to think the truck had gone to another area when she heard it. The distant but unmistakable sound of a heavy engine approaching. "They're coming back," Daniel said. "Positions." Emma moved to the front window, holding Daniel's watch in her hand. Daniel stood by the door, ready to try to open it and shout the moment the truck got close enough. The lights appeared first, bright and orange, reflecting off the snow. Then the truck itself, huge and yellow, making its way back down the street, making another pass, clearing more snow. When the headlights swept toward the bus, Emma raised the watch, catching the light and reflecting it back. She moved the watch back and forth quickly, creating flashes of light. At the same time, Daniel managed to force the bus door open a few inches and began shouting at the top of his lungs, waving his arms through the narrow gap. For a horrible moment, Emma thought it hadn't worked. The truck kept coming, seemingly not seeing them. But then, gloriously, the brake lights came on. The truck slowed, stopped. A door opened on the side of the truck, and a man in a bright orange jumpsuit and a yellow helmet climbed down, looking toward the bus in confusion. "Help!" Emma shouted, her voice hoarse but loud. "Please, we need help. We've been trapped here for 3 days." The man spoke into a radio clip to his shoulder, then began walking toward them through the deep snow. A second man climbed down from the truck and followed him. "My God," the first man said when he got close enough to see Daniel and Emma clearly. "There are people here. Mike, call the rescuers. Now." Everything after that happened in a blur. More trucks arrived. Paramedics with equipment. Police officers asking questions. Thermal blankets being placed over them. Someone handed Emma a cup of warm water that she drank so quickly she nearly vomited. "We need to get them to the hospital," a paramedic said, checking Emma's vital signs. "Both are showing signs of moderate hypothermia, severe dehydration, and possible malnutrition." "Ma'am, when was the last time you ate properly?" "Sunday morning," Emma answered, her voice weak. The paramedic exchanged a worried look with her partner. 3 days? Jesus. You two were lucky. One more day and she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. They were placed on stretchers and carried through the snow to a waiting ambulance. Emma saw for the first time the extent of the disaster the blizzard had caused. Cars completely buried, fallen trees blocking streets, power lines hanging dangerously, buildings with roofs partially collapsed under the weight of the snow. In the ambulance, Emma and Daniel were placed side by side, still visible to each other. A paramedic began inserting an IV into Emma's arm, fluids to combat dehydration. Another checked Daniel's blood pressure and temperature. "Sir, we need your full name and emergency contact information," one of the paramedics said to Daniel. "Is there someone we should call to let them know you're alive and safe?" "Daniel Cross," he replied. "Cross Development Corporation. My executive assistant is James Morrison. The number should be in my phone, but I lost the phone in the car accident. You can look up the company number online. Anyone there can connect you to James." The paramedic paused, recognition crossing his face. "Daniel Cross, the real estate developer." "Sir, You've been missing for 2 days. Your company reported your disappearance when you didn't show up to a meeting Monday morning and no one could reach you. There have been search and rescue teams looking for your vehicle, but with the blizzard," he shook his head. "We'll call your company immediately." Daniel just nodded, but Emma saw the relief on his face at knowing people had cared, had looked for him. "And you, ma'am?" The paramedic turned to Emma. "Full name and emergency contact." Emma hesitated. She didn't want to give her parents' names, not after what they'd done, but she had no one else. "Emma Sullivan," she finally said. I don't have anyone to call." The paramedic looked at her with compassion. "No one? No family? Friends?" "No," Emma said, feeling the humiliation and sadness of the admission. "There's no one." "She has someone," Daniel said suddenly, his voice strong despite his physical weakness. "She has me. Write down my name as her emergency contact. Daniel Cross." Emma looked at him, surprised. Daniel held her gaze, his expression serious and determined. "You saved my life," he said simply. "Now I'm going to take care of you." "That's not negotiable." Emma felt tears streaming down her face, but this time they were tears of gratitude, of relief, of something she couldn't quite name but that warmed her chest in a way no blanket ever could. The ambulance pulled away, sirens blaring, carrying them through the partially cleared streets toward Portland General Hospital. Through the rear window, Emma could see the yellow school bus where she and Daniel had spent 3 days fighting for survival, now partially visible as the snowplows had removed some of the snow around it. That old abandoned bus had been their refuge, their shelter in the storm. And in a strange and unexpected way, it had been the place where 2 lost souls found and saved each other. Portland General Hospital was in controlled chaos when Emma and Daniel arrived. The blizzard had created an avalanche of emergencies. Car accident victims, severe hypothermia cases, heart attacks from people shoveling snow. The emergency rooms were crowded, but Emma and Daniel were prioritized due to the severity of their condition after 3 days of exposure. Emma was taken to an exam room where a team of doctors and nurses began working on her immediately. They removed her dirty frozen clothes, replacing them with a heated hospital gown. IVs were connected for hydration, vitamins, and electrolytes. They checked her body temperature, 93 degrees Fahrenheit, 3 degrees below normal. "You were very lucky," a gray-haired doctor said as she examined Emma's toes for signs of frostbite. "A few more hours, and you would have developed severe frostbite. As it is, you have mild frostbite on your toes. It'll hurt for a few days, and the skin may peel, but there's no permanent damage." "You told the paramedics you hadn't eaten properly for 3 days?" the doctor continued. "What exactly did you eat?" Emma thought for a moment. 3 granola bars and some old crackers, split between 2 people. "And water melted from snow." The doctor paused, looking at Emma with something between horror and admiration. "That's all." "For 3 days?" When Emma nodded, the doctor shook her head. "You're a survivor, Emma Sullivan." They kept Emma for observation, moving her to a private room after a few hours. They gave her a light meal, chicken soup, and toast. Emma ate slowly, each spoonful feeling like an absolute luxury. She had just finished when there was a knock on the door. Daniel entered, pushing a wheeled force stand. He was wearing an identical hospital gown. His beard had been trimmed and his hair washed, and Emma could finally see his face properly for the first time. He was handsome, around 50, with lines around his eyes that suggested he used to smile a lot, clear blue eyes that were intelligent and kind. "They're keeping me too," Daniel said, sitting down in the chair beside the bed. "Moderate hypothermia, severe dehydration, possible concussion from the accident. They want to observe me for 24 hours. "How are you feeling?" Emma asked. "Like I got hit by a truck," Daniel said with a wry smile. "But alive. Thanks to you." He paused. "Emma, I made some calls. To my assistant, to my lawyer. I told them about you, about what you did for me, about your situation." Emma felt her stomach tighten. "Daniel, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Daniel interrupted gently. "I want to. Emma, I promised I'd make sure you'd never be without a place to call home again. I intend to keep that promise." He pulled out a folder he had brought. "Cross Development owns a condominium called Riverside Heights, one of our premium properties, near the Willamette River, 48 units, all high quality." Daniel opened the folder and pulled out photos and documents. "We have 3 units vacant. This is the best one. 1-bedroom apartment on the 5th floor, 90 square meters. Balcony with river view, fully equipped kitchen, in-unit laundry. Market value is $2,200 per month." Emma looked at the photos, heart pounding. The apartment was beautiful, more beautiful than anywhere she had ever dreamed of living. "Daniel, this is amazing, but I can't pay $2,200 a month. I make only $1,400. Emma, Daniel interrupted, placing his hand over hers. "You're not understanding. I'm not offering to rent it to you. I'm offering to give you the apartment. Free, forever." Emma just stared at him. "What?" "The apartment is yours," Daniel said clearly. "No rent, no mortgage, no conditions. It's yours, if you want it. The papers are already being prepared." "I can't accept this," Emma said. Even as part of her screamed it would be crazy to refuse. "It's too much. You don't know me. I owe you my life, Daniel said. And besides, I'm not doing this just out of gratitude. I'm doing it because you showed me kindness when I was at my lowest point, because you deserve to have a safe place, and because I can do it. I have 50 properties. One apartment won't make a difference to me, but it'll completely change your life. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. Why are you doing this for me? Because someone has to, Daniel said simply. Your family should have, but they didn't, so I will. They sat in silence for a moment, just looking at each other, two strangers who had become something more through 3 days of shared survival. There's more, Daniel finally said. The apartment is just the beginning. You mentioned you work as an administrative assistant, making $1,400 a month? That's shameful for someone with your skills. Cross-development needs a residential operations manager, someone to oversee the daily maintenance of our condominiums, handle tenant complaints, coordinate repairs. The salary is $55,000 a year, full benefits, health, dental, retirement plan. Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. Daniel, you're offering a free apartment and a job that pays 4 times what I make now. Yes, Daniel said. And before you say it's too much, let me be clear. You would actually be working, earning that salary. This isn't charity. It's a real job that needs to be filled, and I believe you'd be perfect for it. But I've never managed properties before, Emma protested. You've run a household for years, coordinated repairs, handled bills, managed tight budgets. You have exactly the practical experience I need. And beyond that, he smiled, you've shown under extreme pressure that you have compassion, quick thinking, and the ability to make tough decisions. Those are exactly the qualities I want in someone managing my properties. Emma wiped the tears from her face. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Daniel said. Say you'll take the apartment. Say you'll take the job. Say you'll let me do something good with the wealth I've built. Emma, you saved me. Now let me save you too. Emma looked at the photos of the apartment again. The river view, the modern kitchen, the space that would be completely hers. Then she thought of going back to her parents, begging them to take her back. She thought of looking for another low-paying job, another tiny apartment she could barely afford, or she could say yes. She could accept this unbelievable second chance fate had placed in her path. Yes, she finally said, her voice firm despite the tears. Yes, I'll take it. The apartment and the job. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Daniel smiled, a genuine broad smile that completely transformed his face. No, Emma, thank you. For reminding me there's still goodness in this world. For showing me what really matters. 3 days later, Emma was discharged from the hospital. Daniel had been released a day earlier, but returned personally to pick her up. He arrived driving a black Mercedes, wearing an immaculate suit that probably cost more than Emma made in 6 months. Ready to see your new home? He asked with a smile, as he helped Emma into the car. They drove through Portland, now slowly recovering from the blizzard. The main streets were clear, though there were still massive piles of snow stacked along the sidewalks. Shops were reopening. Life was returning to normal. Riverside Heights was even more impressive in person than in the photos. A modern 8-story building with a glass-on-steel facade, surrounded by trees and well-maintained gardens. A decorative fountain at the entrance currently turned off for winter, and a uniformed doorman who greeted Daniel by name. Mr. Cross, it's so good to see you, safe and sound. We heard about your accident. What a terrible situation. Thank you, Marcus, Daniel said. This is Emma Sullivan. She'll be our new residential operations manager and also living in apartment 5B. Marcus smiled warmly at Emma. Welcome, Ms. Sullivan. If you need anything, just let me know. They took an elegant elevator up to the 5th floor. Daniel used a key to open the door to apartment 5B, then handed it to Emma. You're home, he said simply, gesturing for her to step in first. Emma walked in and had to catch her breath. The photos hadn't done it justice. The apartment was bright and spacious, with oak hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, a kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The bedroom had a walk-in closet and ensuite bathroom, and the balcony offered a stunning view of the Willamette River. It's perfect, Emma whispered, walking slowly through the space, touching the walls as if to confirm it was real. There's more, Daniel said. He opened the bedroom door, and Emma saw the space wasn't empty. There was a fully assembled queen-size bed with new linens, a dresser, a nightstand, a comfortable armchair near the window. I wasn't sure if you had furniture, Daniel explained, so I had my team furnish the basics. If you don't like something, we can change it. Emma turned to him, tears flowing freely now. Daniel, this is too much. It's all too much. I don't know how I'll ever thank you. You already have, Daniel said gently. You saved me. That's all that matters. He paused, then continued. Emma, I want you to know something. You're not alone anymore. Yes, your family abandoned you. That was cruel and unfair. But now you have a new beginning. And if you'll let me, I'd like to be your friend. Not just your employer, but your real friend. Emma nodded, unable to speak through the tears. Daniel stayed a few more minutes, showing Emma how the thermostat worked, where the laundry room was, how to access the building's gym and pool. Then, before leaving, He turned at the door. You start work on Monday, he said. Office is on the first floor of this building. 8 a.m. My assistant James will train you the first week. And Emma? He paused. Welcome home. After he left, Emma stood alone in her new apartment. She slowly walked from room to room, still barely believing it. 3 days ago, she had been freezing to death on an abandoned bus, hopeless, with no future. Now she had a beautiful home, a well-paying job, and a friend who had appeared at the darkest moment of her life. She stepped out onto the balcony, even with the lingering cold, and looked at the city below. Somewhere out there was the house she grew up in, where she had been rejected. Her parents in Madison probably weren't even thinking about her anymore, probably happy she was out of their lives. And surprisingly, Emma found she no longer felt angry. She felt at peace, because she realized something important. Sometimes, the people who reject us are, without knowing it, making room for something far better to come into our lives. The blizzard that had seemed like the end of everything had, in fact, been the beginning of everything. 3 months had passed since the historic blizzard that had completely changed Emma Sullivan's life. It was a sunny April morning, and she was in her office on the first floor of Riverside Heights, reviewing maintenance reports when her phone rang. Emma Sullivan, operations manager, she answered professionally. Emma, it's Aunt Margaret. Emma felt her whole body tense. She hadn't spoken to anyone in the family since that terrible day in January. Aunt Margaret, what do you want? Emma, I need to tell you something. Your mother asked me not to call, but I can't stay quiet anymore. Margaret's voice was tense, worried. It's about Madison. Emma waited, saying nothing. Her boyfriend came back. That married man? He convinced Madison to give him access to your parents' bank accounts, saying he was going to invest their money. Emma, he took everything. $63,000. All of your parents' retirement savings. And then he disappeared again. Emma closed her eyes. And you're telling me this because? Because your mother is desperate? They're going to lose the house. They can't pay the mortgage without those savings. And Madison is 8 months pregnant and has nothing. No money, no plan. The baby is due in 6 weeks and she doesn't even have a crib. Aunt Margaret, Emma said calmly. My mother threw me out of the house in the middle of a deadly blizzard. She gave me 48 hours to leave the only home I ever knew. She chose Madison over me, even knowing I had nowhere to go. Why would she think I'd help now? Because you're not like them, Margaret said softly. You've always been different, Emma. You've always had a bigger heart. I know they don't deserve your help, but I'm asking anyway. Emma hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long moment. Part of her wanted to feel satisfaction, wanted her parents to experience a fraction of the despair she had felt when she was cast out. But the other part, the part that had shared her last granola bars with a dying stranger, couldn't simply ignore it. She picked up the phone again and dialed a familiar number. Daniel Cross. Daniel, it's Emma. Do you have a few minutes? I need some advice. An hour later, Emma and Daniel were sitting in a cafe near the condominium. Emma had told him everything. Margaret's call, her parents' situation, the dilemma she faced. What do you think I should do? She asked, stirring her coffee distractedly. Daniel was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. Emma, do you want to know what I think? I think you already know what you want to do. You're not asking me for permission, you're asking me for confirmation. Emma sighed. I can't just leave them in misery, Daniel, no matter what they did to me. I'm not like that. I know, Daniel said with a gentle smile. That's why you are who you are. That's why you saved me on that bus when you could have let me die and used the resources for yourself. He paused. But Emma, if you're going to help, do it on your terms, not because they asked or because they feel guilty, but because you choose to be better than the situation. Emma nodded slowly. You're right. And another thing, Daniel added, you're not alone in this anymore. If you need help, support, I'm here, always. The following Saturday, Emma drove to the house where she grew up for the first time in 3 months. The yard was unkempt, the paint peeling in places, signs of neglect that hadn't existed when Emma lived there. She rang the bell and waited, heart pounding. It was Robert who opened the door. He looked as if he had aged 10 years and 3 months. His face was thinner, his eyes sunken with deep circles. Emma, he said, shocked. You're alive, obviously, Emma said flatly. May I come in? Robert opened the door wider, letting her pass. Linda was sitting on the living room sofa, and Madison was reclined in an armchair, her belly now huge. All three looked at Emma as if they were seeing a ghost. You're okay, Linda finally said, and there was something in her voice Emma couldn't identify. Relief? Guilt? Yes, I'm fine, Emma said, standing near the door, not sitting down. No thanks to you. A heavy silence fell over the room. Emma? Robert began. No, Emma cut him off. You don't get to speak first. I do. You threw me out of the house in the middle of the worst snowstorm in 30 years. You gave me 48 hours to leave, without caring if I had somewhere to go, if I had money, if I would survive. You chose Madison and never looked back. Madison looked away, ashamed. Linda wrung her hands in her lap. I almost died, Emma continued, her voice steady but controlled. I spent 3 days in an abandoned school bus, freezing and starving, but I survived. And more than that, I found something you never gave me, someone who values me. Emma, we're so sorry, Linda began. tears streaming down her face. "No," Emma said. "Don't do that. Don't pretend you feel something now that you need me," Aunt Margaret called me. "I know about the money. I know you're losing the house. I know Madison has nothing for the baby, so you came to rub it in our faces," Madison said bitterly, finally looking at Emma. "No," Emma said calmly. "I came to offer help, but on my terms." All three stared at her in surprise. Emma pulled an envelope from her bag. "Here's a check for $15,000, enough to cover 6 months of mortgage and still have some left to get reorganized. I also have the contact for an employment agency that can help Dad find part-time work. And for Madison," she turned to her sister, "I have a list of community resources for single mothers, assistance programs, subsidized daycare, free financial counseling." Linda looked at the check with wide eyes. "Emma, where did you get this money? I have a new job, a good job. I make enough to support myself and still help you, if I choose." Emma paused. "But I need to make one thing clear. This doesn't mean we're okay. It doesn't mean I'll go back to being part of this family as if nothing happened. You hurt me deeply. You betrayed my trust in a way I don't know if it can ever be repaired." "Then why are you doing this?" Robert asked, genuinely confused. "Because I choose to be better than you were to me," Emma said simply. "Because even after everything, I can't watch you lose everything and do nothing. But that doesn't mean I've forgiven you. It just means I won't let anger turn me into someone I don't recognize." Emma placed the envelope on the coffee table. "Use that money wisely. And Madison, for God's sake, get professional help, therapy, support groups, anything. You're going to be a mother in weeks. You need to be prepared." She turned to leave. Belinda quickly stood. "Emma, wait, please. I need to tell you something." Emma stopped but didn't turn around. "When you didn't call, when we couldn't find you that first week," Linda said, her voice breaking, "I thought you were dead. I thought we killed you. And in those days, I realized the horrible mistake we made. You were always the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who cared. And we treated you like you were disposable." Linda sobbed. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I live every day with the weight of what we did, with the guilt of having chosen wrong." Emma finally turned, looking at the mother who had rejected her. She saw a broken woman, full of regret, but she also saw that the regret came too late, after the consequences had already struck. "Maybe one day I can fully forgive," Emma said softly. "But today is not that day. Today I just choose not to carry hate. There's a difference." She left the house without looking back. When Emma returned to her apartment in Riverside Heights, she found Daniel waiting in the lobby with 2 cups of coffee and a sympathetic smile. "How was it?" he asked. "Hard," Emma admitted, "but necessary. I did what I had to do." "That calls for a celebration," Daniel said. "Or at least a decent coffee and a conversation on the rooftop." They went up to the rooftop of the building, which had a panoramic view of Portland. The city was beautiful in the late afternoon light, the river reflecting the setting sun. "You know," Daniel said after a few minutes of comfortable silence, "Catherine used to say that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you back." Emma looked at him. "She sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Daniel confirmed. "And she would have liked you very much." He paused. "Emma, in these last 3 months, working together, building this friendship, you've become like a younger sister to me, the family I choose. And I hope you feel the same." Emma felt tears fill her eyes. But this time, they were good tears. "I do. You showed up when no one else did. You stayed when no one else stayed. You chose to value me when my own family didn't. Then that's what we are," Daniel said with a smile. "Chosen family, forged in the fire of a snowstorm and in the kindness that refused to die in the cold." Emma smiled back. A genuine, complete smile. "Chosen family. I like that." They clinked their coffee cups to strangers who had become family through extraordinary circumstances, proving that sometimes the greatest blessings come from the darkest moments. And down below, somewhere in the city, an abandoned yellow school bus remained as a silent witness to the miracle that had happened inside it. 2 lives saved, 2 souls healed, and proof that kindness is never wasted, even when everything seems lost. What an incredible story, isn't it? Emma was rejected by her family, but she found something much greater. A new family, based on choice, kindness, and mutual respect. Did this touch you in some way? Leave a comment about what you thought of this story. If you believe in second chances and in kindness being rewarded, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to believe that better days can always come, even after the worst storms. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next emotional stories. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, remember, the family that rejects you sometimes makes space for destiny to deliver exactly what you always deserved.